Nomiki show. We clash momentarily for clash solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, fake fed, everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki show.
Hello and welcome to TNS Live. It is Tuesday, so you know we do TNS Live 8 p.m. on Tuesday. We start off on all the platforms and then we dig in even deeper and we move over to rockfin.com/Nomiki. If you are already not if you're not already a subscriber, proper English, go check us out at rockfin.com/Nomiki. Tuesdays are days that we dig into issues with one person. We go a lot deeper, substantive. I'm not like a streamer, so I'm not like gaming at the same time. Although if that's your craft, go for it. You do you. I have the attention span of being able to have one conversation at once. Even having a show that's daily is a lot for me. But today I'm really excited because we have a dear friend of the show, Eoin Higgins, who has a great Substack and podcast called The Flashpoint. And man, Eoin, you are like constantly writing. I have so much admiration for people who are relentlessly writing because your focus, I just said I have major ADD. I can't. It's a lot of work, and I that's a craft. So amazing work you're doing right now. I was just looking at the Flashpoint. And all the stories you've generated in the last few weeks alone are extraordinarily noteworthy. So good work there. Well needed.
Thank you. Thanks for having me too.
Of course. So I'm gonna start off with something that I remembered from 2016. I was a surrogate on Bernie Sanders' campaign, and 2016 was such a whirlwind campaign. There were a lot of things happening. The establishment was being challenged. People were, moving in solidarity. Lots of movements came together. And I remember somehow we got in touch. You reached out to me, I think, or someone put us in touch from the campaign to talk about Tulsi Gabbard. And it was pretty early. And you brought up some things about her history that either I wasn't aware of at the time or I didn't think were as notable or important because frankly, I was too focused on the campaign and not about every single surrogate and person on the campaign. And you kind of like shook me up a little bit. I'm not going to lie. I got off the call and I was like, I wasn't like, I stood by her, but I wasn't like, I didn't know what to defend. I'm not going to defend something I don't know. But you were onto something. You were really onto her early. And I guess I could just start off with how did you get onto the Tulsi beat like before everybody else?
Yeah. So this is like gonna be pretty niche, but there's gonna be like 4 or 5 people that will understand what I'm about to say. At the time, I was doing like freelance work, but I was also working for a local paper in the Berkshires in Western Massachusetts, where I'm originally from. And there was a guy who lived in town who I talked to, for stories and stuff because he was involved with politics, and his name was Ray Alt. Um, and he was a big Bernie supporter. And then Bernie dropped out, and he became a Tulsi 2020 guy. I think he was like one of the first people to do Tulsi 2020. This was like summer of 2016. He painted it on the side of his car.
my God.
He went all in for Tulsi, and I just kind of have I tend to have kind of a snap reaction when I see people treating politicians with that much kind of like worship.
Yeah.
And so my reaction was like, I'm going to start like looking at who Tulsi Gabbard is. And the more that I looked at it, the more disturbed that I got. The Hindutva stuff, the anti-Muslim stuff, which at the time, this was before like she went back to the right wing, right? Back because she started her career very socially conservative, but she went back to it more recently. But at the time, she was still kind of more liberal Democrat on most issues, and just the Islamophobia and the Hindutva stuff was really disturbing to me. And so I just started digging into her, and I think that I have been thoroughly vindicated.
You definitely have, and it's tough because
Sorry, I just want to say one other thing. Ray ended up making Run Tulsi Run, the Facebook page that has hundreds of thousands of backers and followers. So he went all in for Tulsi. And
is he still with her?
I mean, I don't know if he was ever like with her. You might also remember him, and this is like a couple people would remember this, but in 2016 when Bernie won New Hampshire, they like CNN or something was like videoing this guy dancing at the victory party, and that is Ray as well.
Interesting. I was at that victory party.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because I'm curious if he still supports her.
He after I wrote my first Tulsi article in 2016, he blocked me on all mediums. I haven't spoken to him since, so I would not know.
Interesting. I mean, she was an interesting vehicle, and I think she definitely took advantage of it, which will lead to our continued conversation. We're going to talk about certain figures who've danced in, with the left, and really their backstories and how now they're either moving to the conservative side aggressively or sort of as pipelines into conservative movement through different issues. And I think Tulsi's interesting because she did have this conservative background, and probably why, frankly, the Democratic establishment recruited her in the first place to run for Congress, because they love a good conservative Democrat. She bucked the party, notably with Bernie. I remember a lot of folks within the Democratic Party infrastructure calling me up and being like, "You're on the Bernie." We're like, "Can you? This is insane." She's like going, all, and I myself went all in against Democrats. But there's limitations. It's like there was a broken institution. It wasn't like a launch pad for some sort of psychotic like conservative takeover of the progressive movement. So I mean, here she is with Steve Hilton, who I've also been on his show, but I represent the left. I don't pal around with the Republicans when I go on that show. She has, I think what's fascinating is why she turned on the Democrats. Do we know? Obviously, Bernie was an opportunity for more, but she left her vice chair position of the DNC, which basically has no authority, just so folks know. It's not like she was, calling the shots. Why? Do we know? Was there like a fight or something?
I think that the Democratic Party, which I had no loyalty to or affection for, and that's probably where you and I might differ a little bit on that. But I think that she joined. So, all right. So you have to go back like 20 years and go back to Hawaiian state politics, where I'll try and do this like really quick. Like her father, I believe his name is Mike Gabbard, is a homophobic social conservative, big political name in Hawaiian state politics. He's also involved with the Chris Butler, Hare Krishna cult, which is also involved, which Tulsi is also involved with. Her husband's a member. Her mother-in-law, who runs or who used to run her congressional office in Hawaii, is a member. There's a lot of weird stuff about that. I'm not going to go like super deep into that, but essentially, like she joined Congress when she was like in her very, very early 20s. She was very anti-gay. She then joined the military. When she came back from the military, she
joined the state house, you mean?
Yes, yeah. So she came back from the military and joined or kind of like reinvented herself as a liberal Democrat. Now, she had been a Democrat before, but people like, you got to understand, being a Democrat in Hawaii is just how you get elected. It's like in like states like Massachusetts too, where you just have like an overwhelming majority support. So
it's like Eric Adams running as a Democrat, even though he's a Republican before.
Yeah. But it's even more than that. I mean, it's something. It's like I mean, because these guys are really fun. It's like the guy who was running against Richie Torres in New York.
Yeah.
They get like the hyper homophobic guy, and so instead we get this anti-Palestine guy, Richie Torres. But like, he's not as right. But like I'm saying, like that, like it has to operate as a big tent in that way, because that's the only way for these. Or well, I mean, it doesn't have to, but they take advantage of the fact that it does. Anyway, so she comes back, she reinvents herself as kind of a more liberal Democrat, uses her military credentials to kind of like, get into politics, gets elected to Congress, gets a couple of puff pieces written about her in the New York Times, joins the Democratic establishment, joins the DNC. And then I think that, I mean, I don't know, but I think that in 2016, I think that she saw where things were going. I think that she could tell that Clinton was not going to win against Trump, which I think that you have to give her credit for. I mean, like the thing is that I find her politics reprehensible, and I find her to be completely untrustworthy. But I do think that she's very intelligent, and so I would not be surprised that she would be able to see like this kind of thing coming. So she made the calculation to, or maybe she was thinking about 2020 and thinking about running then, and knew that if she made a move like this, she would catapult herself into the national conversation. Whatever it was, doesn't really matter. So she leaves the DNC, and then Trump considers her for Secretary of State, or at least like Steve Bannon did. And so she went to go meet with Trump. She didn't get it, obviously. Stays in Congress for another few terms. Pitches herself as an anti-war voice, despite the actual facts of her record and her behavior, and then ends up at where she is now, which is kind of this Fox pundit, just another conservative. I mean, she's doing the thing, and I know that we're going to talk about this with other figures as well, but she's doing this thing where it's like, here's the left case for insert whatever right-wing talking point, culture war thing that you want. And that's kind of been like what she's doing now. I'm of the opinion that I think that she will run for president on the GOP nomination in 2024. She'll try to, yeah. And I think that she's a real long shot for something like that. But if she does do it, I think don't underestimate her. Yeah. She's very, very, very smart, and she's a very savvy politician, and there's a lot of calculation in what she's doing, and I think that you need to look at it that way. I think that there's this impulse a lot of the time with these figures that are on the right and kind of pretend not to be, to think that, you know, they're just like expressing what they really believe. You know, and sometimes that's going to like go against the conventional wisdom. And yeah, maybe that's true. But I think that there is a real level of calculation in what they're doing.
I have this opinion. Sometimes I go on the Majority Report every week, and sometimes I'll get into this like back and forth with Sam, and you know we agree on everything. It's not like this is like on what's behind it. I have a background in politics, and he's more of a, even though I have a lot of media stuff, nothing is accidental in politics, and you know it's not like it's some grand conspiracy. Campaigns are there to win. Some people have dirty tricks, some people play dirtier tricks, some people, but you know, it's not like people just do this for fun. Propaganda is a tool. And so, you know, it's not like, oh, Joe Rogan does what he does because he's a comedian. He realizes he's going to get clicks this way and money. There's a lot of ways to get money and get clicks. That is a conscious decision, and that is a political strategy, and it echoes other political strategies that exist, and it's at a time when there's a lot of division, and there's no unifying leader, and there's economic instability and safety concerns, et cetera, and institutions have failed. You know, what's interesting about Tulsi is she hits on these 2 points, and she did very early, that kind of manifested into where we are today with other key figures. That's why I bring her up first, because you were on this very, very early. You know, she was anti-war and anti-establishment. And that can spill over into, I'm sure you've seen these folks online where they're so anti-imperialism that they don't recognize the imperialism of other countries. US does bad, of course. So does Modi. So does Putin. So does, China. So does Singapore. You know, there's multi... We're sitting, you know, we're not in it's not like 1946 here.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that I think that there are a couple things that can tend to get conflated, right? Which and I think that a lot of the time that is what these post-left or faux left figures can end up doing, right? Which is it's not so much ignoring the bad behavior of other countries that is so much the issue. I think that there is an argument to be made that people in the US, right, should concentrate on what the US is doing, should concentrate on what their country is doing and what their country is funding, right, rather than shifting focus away to official state enemies. And I'm not arguing for or against that position, but I am going to say that I think that is a valid argument, right? I do think though that there's a difference between doing that and deciding that you're then going to treat every action by any official or unofficial, right? Because I would say that like China and Russia are like unofficial enemies of the US.
Mm-hmm.
They're certainly not declared, like we're not at war with them.
Right.
But these are large countries with their own interests and their own spheres of influence, and they do their own things to the countries around them and the countries in their spheres of influence, just like the US, some of which are fine, some of which are very bad.
Mm-hmm.
And again, so again, like if your position is that that we need to concentrate on what goes on in the US, like that's totally, I think that's valid. I probably agree with that. But what I don't agree with is then when you say, but also every single thing that these countries do is therefore good,
right?
Like
And
that,
there's a thing.
That's where I don't follow it.
And what I don't follow is when they're like, you're reading propaganda. I mean, I've read stuff about Gaddafi lately. Like I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, it's obviously it's very complicated, but it is also pushed by interests I personally believe, and I think there's a lot of evidence to substantiate this at this point, it is pushed by foreign interests who want to have those narratives pushed in certain circles, in certain anti-imperialist circles, whether it's through actual individuals who are pushing these messages, or troll armies, or propaganda videos that are being paid for by the Iranian government. For one of them I saw, some of them are through foundations that have, Assad interests, et cetera, et cetera. But then you have someone like Tulsi Gabbard amplifying this stuff, retweeting
but I just want to push back on that a little bit, though. But like, because isn't the counter to that, though, that like that a lot of progressives and progressive voices make videos and arguments that are funded by U.S. interests and U.S. So I guess
we're not in the country.
Right.
For instance, this is not going after America. Let me make this even clearer. For instance, like the Grayzone, they publish attack videos against basically media figures like myself, like Anna Kasparian, like Benjamin Dixon, Sam Cedar, whatever. Anybody who takes the reasonable route of America does bad things, also Putin does bad things, also, highlighting the multidimensional aspects, as well as the Democratic Party is in total destruction and failure. But this is how you and your local community can run for office, challenge bad Democrats, challenge Republicans, whatever. Anything that attacks, goes at the solutions. And there have been these wild smear campaigns from, somebody from Free Press TV or whatever it is. It's Iranian state TV. It's an American that they're paying in the US or wherever he is to do smears, or the Grayzone or whatever. And that is different. Like I'm sure the US government's doing that, but like it's breaking apart the left, and a lot of the left is falling for it, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, like, again, I'm not trying to like get into a whole debate over this, and I don't, right. Again, I want to be clear. I'm spouting off a little bit there. I'm not talking about something that I have like actual evidence for. So like important, but I mean, it's interesting that you bring up Grayzone, because, their thing used to be this kind of foreign policy reporting that they used to focus on, irrespective of who
right.
was funding it, and irrespective of like whose narrative like they were pushing. But now, much like Jimmy Dore or many of my fellow Substack writers, who are of course much more successful than I am, but it's just like right-wing culture war bullshit.
Yep.
And that seems to be, I mean, the Grayzone at this point, especially with the departure now of Ben Norton, now just seems to be completely dominated by Max Blumenthal's conspiracy theories about COVID, and this kind of like domineering approach that he has to people like, like Dan Cohen or Alice Rubenstein, who just kind of parrot like whatever he says. And now they're talking about like anti-vax. They're supporting this like right-wing trucker convoy thing up in Canada. I find it more interesting to me that like it's more interesting to me that they have shifted to this now than whose narratives they may have like been talking about before, because now there really isn't any actual reporting on that site. It's just a bunch of like right-wing agitprop against like COVID vaccines and mandates and public health measures, etc. Yeah.
Which I want to get to in a second. We have to take a quick break because I think I would like to deconstruct just like how this pipeline functions, because there was Ben Norton did a classic propaganda video that when I was just talking about how Anna Kasparian and myself were CIA agents, like, and then jumbled a bunch of stuff together, and it's like, oh, then why is our audience so much smaller? Come on. But that is somebody who did that, and then he's left, and who knows what he's going to do now. But they did this thing to basically attack anybody who's trying to like keep the left organized, essentially. I think there's no other way of saying it than that. But they've done that job.
Yeah.
And now they've got to move in. They've brought in as many people as they could from that left community and need because it's death by 1,000 cuts with Republicans. It's not like they're going to take over the Bernie army. They just need enough to basically win their gerrymandered district primaries and whatever. So something to think about during our quick little break. We're going to move over exclusively to rockfin.com/Nomiki. If you're not there already, please join us over there. We'll give you a few seconds to join us. And if you haven't already, make sure to like and subscribe this video. And we'll see you in a couple seconds with Eoin Higgins.